Today on Cassidys Craveable Creations, we're making a gorgeous keto German chocolate cake with a soft and tender crumb and a gooey coconut pecan frosting. Hi, I'm Cassidy from Cassidys Craveable Creations, and for today's German chocolate cake, we're going to start with the cakes. And the first thing when making a cake is you do not want it to stick to the pan. And so to keep it from sticking to the pan, I like to put parchment paper on the counter and then just put the pans on top of the parchment paper. And then I just take a marker, trace around the pans, and then I cut the parchment paper out. Once you have your parchment circles cut out, I just like to drizzle some oil into the pan and rub it around and get everything nice and covered. And I put it in, and then I put just a little bit of oil on top of the parchment paper also, and I set it aside. And I am using 8-inch round cake pans today for this cake. Now we're just going to mix all of the dry ingredients in a large bowl. We have blanched almond flour, coconut flour, and when you buy coconut flour, be sure to look at my website and look at my recommended brands, and I will have a link to the recipe on my website in the description below, because not all coconut flours have the same absorbency. Some are much more absorbent than others, so be sure to pay attention to what brand you buy. Okay, and now we have cocoa powder, and I'm just using natural cocoa powder, not Dutch processed. Baking powder, baking soda, and sea salt. Oh, that's kind of stuck. Okay, so we're just going to whisk this together, and if there are any lumps in there, you can just kind of use your hands to break up the clumps, and then we'll set this aside. Now in a medium-sized saucepan, we're going to add some butter, or you can use non-dairy butter, along with some sweetener, some keto sweetener, and any erythritol-based keto sweetener will work. I'm using an erythritol monk fruit blend today, and we're just going to melt the butter, and as it melts a little bit, we're going to add the sweetener. And we're just going to leave this over medium-low heat until the butter is fully melted and the sweetener is dissolved. So the butter is melted, the sugar is pretty dissolved, and we're just going to pour this into our dry ingredients. Get all that yummy goodness in there. Turn this off. And now we're going to stir in also some non-dairy milk. We have a tablespoon of pure vanilla. I love vanilla. I like to put a lot of vanilla in my cakes and desserts. And we have just a little bit of apple cider vinegar. Don't worry, it will not taste like vinegar. It just helps react a little bit with the baking powder to give it a nice rise. So now I'm just going to add the eggs, and if they're easier to combine, if you do 1 egg at a time, if you stir after each egg. And we're using 8 eggs here, which seems like a lot, but that's just kind of the nature of cooking with coconut flour. Coconut flour, it just requires a lot of eggs when baking. So everything's all nice and mixed together, and we're just going to evenly distribute this between my 2 prepared pans that we prepared earlier. And then we're going to bake it at 350 degrees for around 40, maybe 50 minutes, or until the toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. And then we're going to let them cool in the pans for about 10 minutes, and then we'll transfer them to a cooling rack to cool completely before frosting. So now that the cakes are in the oven, we are going to work on the coconut pecan frosting. And for the frosting, all we're going to do is we're going to put 3 egg yolks, some butter or non-dairy butter, coconut cream, or if you're not dairy free, you can use heavy whipping cream, and sweetener into a medium-sized saucepan over medium heat, and we're going to bring this to a boil. And for the sweetener, I like to use allulose or an allulose monk fruit blend so it doesn't crystallize after it's been refrigerated, but you can really use any keto sweetener you prefer. And if you use pure allulose, be sure to add a little bit extra because pure allulose isn't quite as sweet as other sweeteners. So we're gonna get this melted, bring it to a boil, and then we're gonna do like a really slow boil or a simmer for about 5 minutes until it's nice and thickened. This has been simmering about 5 minutes and it's gotten really nice and thickened. And I just turned the heat off, and we're gonna add in some unsweetened coconut and some chopped pecans that I toasted in the oven at 300 degrees just for about 5 to 7 minutes until they were nice and fragrant. And also some pure vanilla. So we'll just mix this up here, and we're gonna put this in the fridge and let it cool before we use it to frost the cakes. And this can be made the day before. You can just cover it and put it in the fridge, but it will probably get a little bit hard in the fridge if you leave it in there that long. But all you'll have to do is put it in a microwave safe container, or you can put it back on the stove and you can just heat it until it's barely soft. Now you don't wanna melt it because it still needs to be thick enough to spread, but you can just do over really low heat on the stove or just a few seconds in the microwave to soften it enough, to spread over the cake. So the cake's finished baking, and I let them cool, and then I actually wrapped them in plastic wrap and put them in the fridge for several hours because cakes are best frosted after they've been chilled. And now I'm just going to frost it, and to see exactly how I frost my cakes, refer to the how to frost a semi-naked cake video that I did a few weeks ago, and I will put a link to it up here over my left hand shoulder, and I will put a link to it in the description below. Okay, so I'm just going to start frosting my cakes here. And also, in addition to the coconut pecan frosting, which is like the classic frosting for German chocolate cakes, I also whipped up some chocolate keto buttercream frosting, and I'll also put a link to that over my left hand shoulder and in the link below. And the chocolate buttercream isn't necessary, but I just love it, and I always add buttercream to my German chocolate cakes. Let's see. So I like to pipe a little bit around the edge before I fill the center with the coconut pecan frosting. I forgot to put the parchment paper under my cakes because I'm super messy when I frost my cakes and I don't have a turntable. I'm frosting it directly on my cake stand, so I always put parchment paper under. Now I'll put my second layer on, and I always put it upside down so the top is nice and flat, and make sure it's nice and level. So unlike a traditional semi-naked cake where you go ahead and frost the top, I'm going to go ahead and frost the edges first because I'm going to do the top just a little bit different. So I'm going to put my frosting on the edges, and then I'll go through and smooth it out with a bench scraper. Now that we got the frosting on the sides and I've smoothed it out, I just like to do a little bit of decoration with the chocolate buttercream on the edges, and then fill the top with the remaining pecan frosting, coconut pecan frosting, which is so yummy. Now I'm just going to add the rest of this gooey frosting, which is like just pretty much the best thing in the world. I squished some of my little decoration. I'll have to go back and kind of fix it. Let me just touch up the side here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take the parchment paper off, and it's kind of hot in here, so my frosting is actually melting just a little bit. So I'm going to pop this in the fridge for a few minutes, and then we're going to meet you back here to taste it. So we let this set in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes to set up a little bit, even though now that we've come back out here, the frosting is already starting to melt again. But I'm really excited to try this. German chocolate cake has always been my very favorite cake. So let's cut into it and see what it looks like. Oops. Ooh, look at that. That looks really, really good. Oh, that's Got some frosting. Let's get here. Oh, yummy. Okay, I'm just gonna take a piece right here. Mmm. So good. I can't talk with my mouth full. This is so delicious and I'm so excited for you to try it. To see more recipes like this, be sure to hit that like button and notification bell below.